Okay, so the real reason Christianity drifted from the marketplace. I believe faith is a commercially viable expression and it should be within the mainstream marketplace. And I know that that is not a popular thought, but I believe that there's a reason why Christianity drifted from the mainstream, and it's not for the reasons why, the popular reasons why people think that. I believe that God is bringing correction to the entertainment business. I believe that the church has failed the culture. I'm going to explain that, and abused Christian artists, set us aside, and I think that there's been a huge price to pay for that. But I think now it's our job as Christian artists or artists of faith to reform the model. We need to restore artists of faith. And we need to build networks in this digital age where the landscape is being totally disrupted. I think now is a great time for us to create some networks that compete in the marketplace of giants with Netflix and Disney and Amazon and those guys, Apple, because the technology is there to do so. But I don't think it's going to happen if we keep thinking of entertainment and story in the way that we've been thinking about it. And I'm going to explain that. The wrong reason why Christian or faith-based art has been outlawed or set aside from the mainstream marketplace is not because Christian artists are somehow subpar or not good at what they do, bad, or that faith doesn't belong in the mainstream. I think those reasons are all wrong. They're theologically wrong. If we have a relationship with the creator of the universe, the only true creator, Satan is not a creator, he's a counterfeiter. But if we have a relationship with the creator of the universe, it is theologically correct that we are tapped into the source of all creativity and that we should be creative. So the fact that it doesn't look like that means that there's something wrong. And I think there's something that needs to be corrected. And that's what I want to address. There is a renaissance coming. I believe that it's coming. There are rumblings in Hollywood happening. But I think that, there's some ideas that we need to put out there and for Christian artists to consider. So I kind of go back in history. I've been doing some research just to sort of get my head around what has happened in the past. And, artists in Europe in the Middle Ages started to produce work that is around the idea of the good and the beautiful. And the clergy and the church felt like those dramas were overshadowing their sermons, and so outlawed those artists and their work and sort of put them out onto the streets. We fast forward to the 20th century and the rise of film and then the rise of television. I think a similar thing actually happened. We had, following World War One, there was a frequent source of screen material that came from the New York stage. And it was filled with topless shows and performances filled with curse words. It's really surprising. I don't think people really understand what was being made in the early days of film. Because I think, I've looked back at early film and gone, gee, there was a lot of very proper content. But it wasn't so much like that in the very early stages. And there was a lot of adult subject matter and sexually suggestive dialogue and things like that. And then in 1922, there was several risque films and a series of off-screen scandals involving Hollywood stars that prompted change. And Hollywood itself wanted to clean up its image. And so they consulted Catholic laymen and a Jesuit priest that sort of came together. It wasn't the church formally. It was these guys, and they created a code to govern the film industry. And it's really surprising when you look back at what that code talked about, because it's definitely not what we have today in terms of our Christian subgenre that exists, our faith-based subgenre that seems to have risen over the last decade or two, of these cheesy Christian films that sort of have their own criteria that sort of says, there's got to be Christian characters, there can't be any, there's got to be the salvation scene, you've got to have the church service somewhere in there where the preacher sort of preaches the message and all this sort of stuff. And it's cringy and it's badly cast and all the rest of it. And that's not what these guys came up with. And that's not what the entertainment business or the studios took on in the 30s. I'll read you some of the things that they actually are in the criteria. It's pretty long, but things like, profanity, this includes, the things that they wouldn't allow. Things like profanity includes the words God, Lord, Jesus Christ, all those sort of things, hell, damn, God, all this sort of stuff. Any licentiousness or suggestive nudity, in fact or in silhouette, all that sort of stuff. The illegal drug trafficking, sex perversion, white slavery is in there. They wouldn't allow it to be in there. Sexual diseases and those sort of things can't be. Scenes of actual childbirth, children's sex organs, ridicule of the clergy, willful offence to any nation, race or creed. That's their criteria. Then the things that they felt like should require special care were things like the use of the flag, national flag, international relations, arson, firearms, theft, robbery, that sort of stuff, brutality, murder, committing murder, smuggling. This stuff is just rife in our what we're doing today. But they just said it needed to be treated carefully. And I know it seems prudish and like people would think, oh no, it's restricting our freedom. But actually, Plato talks about this. Thousands of years ago, Plato talked about one of the first things he addressed. He's one of the greatest philosophers that ever existed, that we still look to today. And one of the first things he talks about is story and the importance of moral storytelling and upholding values for the sake of society and the health of the culture. And we thought we knew better. We don't need that stuff. We can just go it can be free for all. We don't need all those restrictions. And look at our culture today. And there are people that are still trying to say that entertainment has no bearing on the health of our culture. How can that even be? That is it just doesn't even make logical sense. We're wondering why we have all these issues in our culture, and yet we just want to blurt it out and just expose it to the culture and think that our culture and young people particularly, but even just the culture at large just should be able to govern themselves. No, I think we need to set examples. There needs to be leadership in our culture, in the thinking of our culture, and there needs to be some special care given to certain topics. Anyway, so these things are what this code addressed, and so they cleaned it up. And but what happened was that then the church gets involved, and the church, then television, rises to the fore, and the church, it was then the birth of Christian television, Christian churches again, and this is how it affects, I link it to what happened in the Middle Ages, because the church then sort of felt like story was overshadowing, their sermons, and sort of outlawed that expression, but not overtly like they did in the Middle Ages. This time, they just commandeered it. They sort of just sort of took it over a little bit and devised their own sort of Christian television when Christian television was funded by advertisers. This is in the 60s, and the church didn't want to be beholden to the market or to what advertisers dictated. And so they devised another strategy. They said, well, we're just going to raise money for airtime ourselves, and we're just going to go to our own congregations. We're going to raise money, and we don't need you. We can just buy airtime and broadcast what we want and put our sermons out there just the way we like it. And Christian television was born. And I think that is really where the separation from the mainstream happened, where the Christian television wasn't beholden to the market, and it sort of went off on its own and did what it wanted. And I think it's caused now, then in 2006, Mel Gibson came out with The Passion, and it sort of awoke people, the church, and they thought, wow, we could make movies ourselves, and so, but rather than empowering artists and empowering story, the churches again commandeered it and decided to do their own thing. And so they started making these Christian films, and it was churches that were doing this. It wasn't Christian artists. They may have used Christian artists here and there, but really they were raising their own money for the productions again. They were, and they created this subgenre with their own religious criteria that we see in religious films now. And there's a problem with all of that. I think we need to, as faith artists, go back to the ideas of Plato. Consider what he was thinking. We need to go back to what to the code that was devised in the 20s, because I think there's actually some valid thought there. There's some valid points there that we should consider when we are telling our stories, that it's not this religious dogma, with these super religious ideas. I think there's a lot more freedom there, but we need I think we need to consider that there needs to be some conventions to the kind of stories we tell and the impact that our stories have on our culture, and that we need to really craft and carve out a healthy culture. What doesn't need carving out? What part of life can we just leave to its own devices? And, if I left my garden to its own devices, it would just be full of weeds. No, it needs to be tended to and pruned and cared for. And the culture and stories we tell, entertainment and arts, is no different. So I think we need to consider it in those terms. I think we need to go back to the motion picture code and just look at it again, and realize that the situation we're in right now is again the church meddling in an area of society, a mountain of arts and entertainment, an area of culture and society that they shouldn't be meddling in. Now, I'm not trying to be rude. I love the church. I serve the church. I'm here for the extension of the church. But But there are Christian artists and artists of faith that need to rise and take hold of what they've been called to do and do it well. And the church needs to know its place. And so that's my overall message, I think. Artists of faith need to lead the way, in this area. We need to be thinking in these terms. We need to be reforming what has been done to our culture and to how story has been created. We need to reform our ideas and start creating content and building networks around it. So that's my thought for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you join me on the next video. We've got lots more to come. So the real reason why Christianity or faith drifted from the marketplace, it's not what you think. I hope you consider those things, and I'll see you in the next video.